tape. If I don't make this one right, I will launch myself into the sun. All right. I miss shitty fan fiction. A brief excerpt. Listen, we're not here for your money. Where's your dust? Aisle 4. Aisle 4. Wow. She gave in quickly. I snapped my head around to see what aisle I was in. I was in 3. They were right by me. Maybe if I stayed still, they won't notice. Hey, you, put your hands up. I whipped my head around to see a man in a black suit with a red tie. He had red-tinted glasses and a red machete. Why is it always me? One of the best methods I know to do before fight. Play dumb. Did I do something wrong? Am I in trouble? His simple response was to whip out his machete. So, playing dumb was out. Next is my weapon. I flipped open Rainbow Slasher, the name of my weapon. I quickly shot the sword from his hand and tried to get the heck out of there. Unfortunately, there were about 7 more of him. I grabbed the other man, who had tried to sneak up on me, by the arm and slammed him on another. The whole thing was chaotic. That was an excerpt from a fan-written work, also known colloquially as fanfiction or fanfic, based off of a Western anime series called Ruby by Rooster Teeth. More specifically, that was my fanfiction I wrote a little over a decade ago when I was in 6th grade. I would pass around a notebook, more specifically this notebook, back and forth between my friends as we took turns writing chapters about characters we created set in Remnant, otherwise known as the fictional world in Ruby. It didn't last very long, but I am so grateful I still have this. Not only is it a sort of masochistic self-entertainment as I read what 6th grade me earnestly thought was frankly brilliant writing by the part of me and my friends, but it also encapsulated something that has been an important pillar of my life. Fanfiction. At the time, there was a lot about writing fanfiction that appealed to me. I loved writing, and scholastically speaking, it was something I was good at. I also had, frankly, obsessive tendencies when it came to the media I liked. I am, to this day, physically incapable of liking things just a moderate normal amount. It just completely absorbs my life, sometimes for years at a time. I also found myself bored with what school was offering me and lacked the social prowess to maintain relationships outside of a school environment. So I spent a lot of time bored at home, usually with my favorite shows or video games on a constant loop inside my head. Plus, I had parents who didn't know the ramifications of children growing up with unregulated 24/7 internet access, so it was easy for me to just start writing online. Another thing I loved, fanfiction wasn't regulated. In the genesis of online fanfiction, there were no parameters or jurisdictions to creating and publishing to sites like Archive of Our Own, fanfiction.net, or Wattpad. Sure, you needed an internet connection, and you might need an email to create an account if you wanted to publish something instead of just reading the work of others. You might need to certify that you're of a certain age, but, you just had to check a box on a screen. No one was checking that shit. The beauty of having essentially no governance to these sites was that it allowed anyone to write about anything. I was encouraged to write whatever I wanted, and I did. On Wattpad, under my iconic username, Magenta Rose 527, I wrote really, really terrible fanfiction. I created original characters known in the world of fanfiction as OCs, constantly wrote them into corners, spat out clunky dialogue, and relied almost entirely on the use of exposition to move my story forward because I hadn't heard of Show Not Tell yet. The point, however, is not that I was bad at writing. The point was that I felt like I could write whatever I wanted at whatever skill level I was at, and that was okay. Part of that was because there was an abundance of bad fanfiction on the internet. In fact, I would venture to say that the vast majority of fanfiction on these sites is probably still deemed as bad. Compared to traditional publishing, fanfiction didn't have a skill floor or barrier to entry. You didn't need to go through years, sometimes decades, of practicing your craft at writing before advertising your books to various agents, publishing houses, being granted the opportunity for your work to endure several rounds of heavy editing, all for the tiny minuscule chance that it would, maybe, be put out into the world. With fanfic, there was no expectation of greatness or of finally presenting the next great American novel after a lifetime of whittling away, crouched over a desk as you wrote shitty draft after shitty draft. Fanfiction was the shitty draft. What this boils down to is that there's a certain Wild Westness with this era of the internet that I miss. I just think a lot of adolescents developing in this era of being online won't have the same opportunities and freedoms, especially when it comes to writing. I miss the privilege of being allowed to be bad at writing. I miss when fanfiction online didn't come with a status quo. I mean, now websites like Wattpad are designed not as a platform for people to write, but as a product to sell. After I graduated from writing OC Ruby content in 2015, Wattpad came out with content guidelines, an extension of their terms of service. This limited certain content on the website, like sexual content of characters under the age of 18 and glorification of self-harm. Much of the language used in these terms was deemed, abstract and opinionated, which in turn gave more power to Wattpad to can content they didn't like, clean up their image, and come across as more appealing to future investors. They now actually approach writers on the site, ask to gut all the copyrighted content from their fanfictions, and publish them. The site is flooded with ads and has premium features sprinkled throughout the platform. Everything is so pristine, well-oiled, and designed to flip a profit that the idea of posting some half-baked /fanfic of some niche ship from a show nobody has heard of is basically non-existent. At the end of the day, I'm not saying to bring back letting any and all content fly on these sites. Clearly, there's been some good in the inauguration of more guidelines, rules, and more emphasis on actually enforcing them. More censorship, surveillance, and protection allows young people more safe access to the web. Plus, we still have some corners of the internet that give a taste of that Wild West era of being online. The truth is, though, it's getting harder and harder to find these places. The norm has shifted over time with the increased popularity, accessibility, and commercialization of the internet. We have transitioned from a period of self-interest to self-preservation. Now there's so much concern about not being cringe, preserving your digital footprint, privacy, and curating a specific image of yourself that people are afraid of trying things because they don't want to fuck up in front of everyone. For example, how many times have you waited to post something online because you consulted your friends about it first? Did you ever create a spam or Finsta account separating the finished and presentable side of yourself with the relaxed, more personable side? I sure did. I found myself not creating for the sake of creating anymore. Now I create to appease others. I create what I anticipate others expect of me. And I have found no joy in that. I have found anxiety and stress. I have seen myself regress as a person because I am more and more afraid of how I come across and what I genuinely want to do. And I'm just so unhappy doing that. I want you to give yourself permission to be bad at something. Prioritize authenticity over polish. Have your rite of passage. That's the beauty of it. You get to see yourself grow. Originally, I was going to make this video on my diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and how it impacted me, but in retrospect, I don't think you would have gotten to know me as well if I had written about that. I think you have a much more realistic idea of who I am based on this topic. You can see what I'm passionate about, how I view the world, and the things in life I derive fulfillment from. Maybe I could have talked about that with ASD, but I also think there comes to a point where you see more of me through me talking about the things I love than what you can see when given the confines that come with a label or diagnosis I was given. I don't want to write as a way to explain or defend the way that I am, but I want to write because it's something I enjoy. I would have never, ever grown as a storyteller and as a writer if I didn't let myself write really, really shitty Star Wars and Ruby fanfiction. I would go on to spend about a decade writing fanfiction on and off on various sites at various stages in my life. It acted as a constant reminder for me to pursue the things I enjoyed, no matter how cringe-inducing or embarrassing it might seem to others. As the old saying goes, I am cringe, but I am free. Thanks for watching. Okay, author's note. I did want to let you all know that I did truly try to find all the old shit I wrote online. I tried the Wayback Machine. I emailed customer service for Wattpad to no avail. There's a certain fondness for the fanfiction that you wrote a decade ago. But by all means, though, feel free to scour the internet on my behalf. There is nothing stopping you. Thank you.